Hey, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of AngularAir. I'm your host, Justin Schwarzenberger, and today we have an episode talking about the latest and greatest with the Angular CLI, version 6 to be specific. So let's get into it and say hi to our panelists, and then we'll meet our guest. So join us today as panelists. We've got Alyssa and Heckle with us. Alyssa, how's it going?
Hi.
And we got Austin McDaniel. How's it going, Austin?
How's it going? Are you going in alphabetical order? Is that how you?
No, he always goes me first. That's the rule. If you ever didn't do me first, I would cry.
So it goes. I'm just looking at the panels, the little person panels down here at the bottom, and I don't know if that's like the last person to join ends up on the far left. I don't know, but that's what I'm going on. Yeah, so there you go. Bonnie, what's going on?
Whole lot of nada. I'm pretty excited to have this impromptu. I'm not going to say, see, now I've learned not to like be excited about the speaker. I have to just like let you tell us who the speaker is. But I'm always excited to be here. And I'm rocking my hat.
Nice. Yeah, we're almost there. We got a couple more squares and then we're to the guest. So
I'm excited.
All right, we got Ed joining us today. Ed, how's it going?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Good to have you here. And then our guest today, somebody you might know, Mike Brocchi. What's going on, Mike?
Nothing. I didn't know I was a guest, but I'm a guest now.
You're a guest now. Anytime the show is focused on the CLI, you're one of the guests. In this case, you're the only guest. So there you go.
We're talking about the CLI?
No, you're talking about the CLI. We're commenting on it.
I want to do some research. Can I do some research first?
Yeah, sure.
I've got a bug list for you to talk about.
Hey, we're going to need to know how long it's good. We're actually going to, we're just here to pick on Mike because I'll have you guys know that as soon as Justin hit the button to go live, it said, Mike Brocchi just muted you. And I'm like, what, real? So yeah, so I'm going to be picking on Mike. Mike, I have a lot of complaints about the CLI.
I tell you, I try, keep everybody positive in here. I don't know what happens. Sometimes it just goes off the hook and we'll pick.
I know.
I don't know. We'll rectify that.
I'm just kidding. I love Mike Brocchi and I love the CLI. So I say this with a lot of humor.
All right, so we got a new version of it. Some pretty big changes, right? A lot of exciting stuff. So let's hear it from Mike. What do we got going on here at the CLI 6?
Mike, right. Tell us, Mike.
Everything. Okay, everything that's new. A lot. I think the first thing to talk about. Let me look at my notes here. Yeah. Okay.
We should talk about making your own libraries because I'm kind of really excited about that.
Okay, hold on. Let me mute Bonnie. There's things that we need to talk about before that. Before we get into features. So
I want to hear that one too, Mike.
All we want to talk about is libraries.
Libraries are filled with books. Okay, done. All right. So CLI 6. So the big thing is that we went from version 1.7.x, not X, but just as a minor version, to version 6.0. So there's an alignment of major version numbers between Angular Core, Angular CLI, and Angular Material. Everything is now at version 6. So major versions will be in sync and on the same schedule for release every 6-ish months. But just keep in mind that those are just major version numbers. Each package is free to add to do minor releases of different features or patch releases at their own schedule. Those may or may not stay in sync.
Does that mean in 6 months we'll be at CLI version 7 dot something, or does the major version not necessarily change the first number?
Major number is the first, or major version is the first number. So in fall, early winter, look for CLI 7, Angular 7, Material 7, and then 6 months from that, Austin, math question. What's after 7? What'll be around this time next year?
I think 9. That sounds right.
Close enough. Yeah. So yeah, about April, May, or whatever next year, look for CLI 8.
Now,
that's
everyone,
fine.
you heard that first on AngularAir. We can get Mike to stick to that.
Yeah,
So that's in line with all the offerings coming out of Angular, right? We got material in line with that. Everything's kind of onto the same version number. Is that correct?
yes.
I'm neglecting a comment.
We just hold Mike responsible for all of it at this point. Is that we can do that, right?
I mean, if Angular is late on their release, it's probably Brocchi's fault.
Yeah.
I think that was actually true with this Angular 6 version, right?
All right.
I think
now I'm gonna have to
everything
beat
is just my
everybody
fault.
except for Mike. Mike's not getting much love right now. Mike, I'm sure it's not on you.
Hey, I have a request. Is it possible to just have a show you and I chatting, Justin? I mean,
Yes.
that would be nice.
Maybe.
I want to hear about libraries.
Libraries is last. Hopefully we have time within the hour that I can get through. I mean, it's taken us, what, 10 minutes, and we've gotten through version numbers.
Shut up, Mike. It's important. Now move on. Move on. What do we got? Yeah.
We could talk about new features because everybody wants to talk about new features, but not libraries, right? I think that most exciting thing that came out of version 6 with the new release is 2 new commands that were added to the CLI, ngAdd and ngUpdate. Anybody have a preference of which we talk about first?
Update.
Add.
Okay, choice between satisfying Austin and satisfying Justin. Okay, we'll go
I
with
got to vote
update.
for update.
I got slash first, so update. Go ahead, Ed.
Oh, I got to vote for update over there.
You want to give an update on update? An update?
No, that's your job to give the update on update.
All right.
Now I know who came up with
I
schematic.
always have to use the force flag.
All right. I
When
want
you
to
update. You update libraries, so that could be a good segue.
All right, we're talking update command. Go, Mike.
Okay, so ngUpdate is a new command for libraries or packages that decide to support ngUpgrade. Update. ngUpgrade and ngUpdate are 2 different things. ngUpgrade is moving from AngularJS to Angular, and ngUpdate is a new command in the CLI. So if a package implements the necessary rules for following ngUpdate, you can then update your versions of those libraries from one version to the next and write different rules using schematics to be able to go through and fix any breaking change, take advantage of new features, modify client applications to be able to take advantage of that new package or of that new version.
And the cool thing about that is any library can actually do this. It's just the schematic called update. So if you're building a library,
You are wrong.
Stop.
Austin.
False. Time out. It could be named anything. ngUpdate is a key at the root of your package.json. There's a specification for that in the documentation of the dev kit of what values need to be set within there, because you can have different migrations. So if you're at version 5 and you're moving to version 6 or 6 to 6.2, you can specify multiple different migrations that can run from one version to another to be able to update the application. So if it's a multi-step process, if somebody's on version 5 and you're releasing version 8 and you have different migrations to get from 3 to 4, 4 to 5, 5 to 6, all the way up to 8, with even minor jumps, that it'll determine which migrations need to run in order to get to that latest point.
yeah, one cool thing that we did for material is there's actually ngUpdate for material. So if you have material, you want to get to the latest version and things like that, there's updates to walk you through all the steps, all the new API changes and things like that as well.
This is true. Yeah, there's a few libraries out there that have taken advantage of it. And like you said, anybody could do that. So if you have your own library that you're using, whether or not it's published on NPM or on a private repo, you can write your own NPM or ngUpdate schematics to handle those different migrations. I'll be sure to put a note about that documentation in the show notes, because that'll be helpful.
When you run update, is it going to run all of those versions, all of those steps automatically for you? You're going to pick, or how's that work?
So it'll, if you're it'll look into your package.json and say, all right, you're at version 3.0.0. And the latest version when it tries to download is version 5. So it'll say, oh, well, we're going from 3 to 5. What different migrations need to run in order to get from location or version X to version Y?
Martin wants to know, Chaos Monster in the chat wants to know if this won't bloat the schematics with upgrade business logic.
There's different options of how you could write those schematics. You could write it as part of your package, or you could have it as a separate package as well, if you want to do it that way. But then again, if your library or your package is tree shakeable, then that logic won't. It may be longer for an install time to install your package, but not necessarily included in your bundle as you build the application. Tree shaking, good.
Is there? So, which one of those ways would you recommend? To have it separate or to have it all included? Just personal preference?
Yeah, personal preference, whatever you want to do. Either will work. I guess the advantage that I would find of doing it in the main package is that it's already there as part of it. It's not an extra dependency that you have to worry about maintaining. That would be
no deprecation policy.
That would be up to you to have your own deprecation policy for your own APIs.
So ngUpgrade or update sounds really cool. If I'm on Angular 4, Angular 5, can I take advantage of this today?
So I believe that the update schematic that's there goes from 5 to 6. So it's a new feature to take advantage of. But moving forward, the plan is to include update schematics for all future versions.
And this update is not just going to update our package dependencies and things like that. It has the potential to then update code for us as well, right? With the schematics and everything underlying it.
Absolutely. So as schematics are, which is a much deeper topic that we've talked about before, you can import things in like the TypeScript AST parser to be able to go through and ascertain different information. I used the big word ascertain, information about people's applications, to read their code, find out what it's doing and what APIs it's using, to be able to determine where there may be a breaking change. The best example that I found to explain it easier to people is, so when Angular 2 to 4, I believe, is when the change from using the template tag to use an ng template occurred, to be able to go through your HTML templates and say, oh, hey, it looks like you're using the template tag. I'm automatically going to change that tag to be ng template, and therefore you won't have to deal with any breaking changes or deprecation warnings, because we'll be able to ascertain that logic. Now, ngUpdate wasn't in place for 2 to 4, but that's the type of logic that could be written.
Would it actually like rewrite it, or does it like ask you in the terminal and like you say, yes, do that on that file?
No, it will do it for you. So the recommendation.
It's just a big string replace, right?
No. But basically, the recommendation is to make sure you have a saved copy of what you're about to change. So just make sure you do git commit before, create a new branch, whatever. Just work in a clean Git environment or version control environment. If you're not using Git, if you're using something else, make sure you have an environment with no other changes, so that you can isolate the update process.
What were you going to say, Ed?
Oh, I was just going to say to go use Git, but you said it.
Yes, Git, good, got it.
Nice.
And that's alliteration too. That's so cool. See, I'm just so used to Mike being this like big goofy guy that makes us all laugh, and then he starts like this, and I'm like, oh yeah, and he's also really smart. It's like a bonus, Mike.
I like to just talk about the things that other people have done. It makes me sound smart.
Yeah.
Never underestimate the Brocchi. All right. How about ngAdd?
ngAdd. ngAdd is exciting for library owners, and very exciting for users. So Austin's laughing, I think. I don't know. Maybe it's about this. Maybe it's
so basically, it's exciting for everyone, or what?
I know. I was like, why is it only? Exciting.
different levels of excitement. So as a library or author, you typically in your README, you start writing, hey, this is how you contribute. There's one section. And then there's the setup section that could be, I don't know, 3 lines, 4 lines, or scrollable. Hey, first you need to install the package. Then you need to add this module. Then you need to set up your components. Then you need to do this. Then you need to do that. And 75 steps later, hey, look, you can finally get started.
That's too much work.
It is. So not only that, but do you have to document all that? But then your users have to do all of that. So by saying ngAdd and then a given package. So for example, because I'm familiar with it, actually Austin's familiar with it, so we can ask him questions too. If you were to do ngAdd at Angular/material, it will add the dependency for Angular material to your package.json, and then go through and add some imports into your root module, I believe. Correct, Austin? Thumbs up or down?
Yeah, so when you do ngAdd Angular/material, it adds the dependencies of the package to your package.json, like Mike said. It also adds the CDK, which is necessary for Angular. It installs these with NPM. And then it also adds basically browser animation if that's not already added. It adds the default fonts and icons to your project. It sets some like body spacing and things like that, and basically just gets that big page of things that you do when you first install material, right? Those are no longer needed now.
So the benefit to a library author is that they don't necessarily need to maintain that documentation anymore. That could just be, hey, run ngAdd and then the package name, and it'll do all those steps for them. So it automates a lot of that process. But for a user, you don't have to worry about following each one of those steps, step A, B, C, D, all the way down to Z or whatever steps that may be there. It's all handled automatically. So, go ahead.
So how is it handled automatically for the library owners? Like, what do they need to do in order for
well, first of all, it simplifies their documentation, like I said. If you want to have the ability that ngAdd works for your package, all you have to do is define a schematic collection for your package. And inside of that inside of that collection of schematics, include ng-add, a schematic named ng-add. And from there, it will run that schematic after it's installed your dependency to be able to run that schematic. So, and then that given schematic can go ahead and add additional dependencies, modify ng modules, or modify CSS, HTML, TypeScript, whatever you need to do, that functionality to be able to add that in.
And then do you as a package owner or library owner have to handle the logic to do the NPM install stuff or the yarn, or is that you get that for free?
So the installation of your package is handled by ngAdd. So if your package is at Angular/material, as the example, it will automatically install that for you or set that up in the package.json as well as install that. However, if you would like to have any other packages added, like Austin mentioned, that the material package depends upon the CDK, then you automatically have to add, or you have to manually add that dependency and then tell schematics to run the install task upon completion.
What about RxJS? Chaos Monster, my friend Martin is in the chat asking about RxJS because it's separate right now. It's not included, but it would need to move from Angular 5 to Angular 6.
From RxJS from 5 to 6?
Yeah.
That would be part of the ngUpdate process. RxJS doesn't necessarily need to have ngAdd functionality because it's already a dependency of Angular.
So Angular already, I knew that. Yeah.
You get it as part of generating a CLI project.
Yes.
So so that's why he was asking if you had included that, or he said why didn't you include that? Which, because you are responsible for the entire Angular ecosystem. It all comes down to you.
No, RxJS is included when Angular updates. I believe RxJS also updates as part of that process.
Doesn't it do the?
Isn't that part of the Angular core upgrade
Yes.
or
I believe
update?
so. I believe that's the case. I'm not 100% positive, but I believe so. I would have to refer. You can look at update.angular.io to find out all those steps. But I think that's handled when you run update Angular core.
I think
Just run ngUpdate-all and your life is done. Throw a force flag in there too.
Cover all your bases. I love it.
Okay, so with ngAdd, we just need to get the world on board with writing their schematics, so we have support for all libraries, right? That's one thing we need to do.
Yeah, I think part of that is working on documentation for schematics as well, so that people understand the best ways to write schematics so that they can use them for these particular features, as well as customizing your features.
I want to throw something in there, because if you're trying to kind of figure out the schematics and you're not entirely getting everything that you need, there was a really good talk. It's on YouTube, ngConf, the thermonuclear, what is it called? I can't remember.
Global thermonuclear.
Yes, that was a really good one. So because I really like that. I thought you broke it down and made it kind of simple and kind of silly, and it was pretty easy to understand. I thought, don't let it go to your head, but.
That was a great talk, because not just because I gave it.
Because we were heckling you in the front row.
No, it's the only talk I've ever given where people cheered for me when I ran unit tests and they failed. It was odd to run unit tests, have them fail, and people cheered. And
that was awesome, because you warned us, because we knew that you were going to fail.
Did I? I don't know. I kind of blacked out a little in the middle.
It was a great talk. And
then you
not
get
just
more
saying
cheers when you fix it.
Yeah. But there were a couple of us that were sitting in the front row that were like heckling him the whole time, and he was awesome. He just like pushed right through it.
I
kind of like AngularAir.
Yeah, I got a lot of practice with hecklers from doing this show a few times.
And just, I want to just say something, FYI. I would recommend people to not heckle the speaker.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. You're right. I'm sorry.
So, you know, it worked
because,
out in this case, apparently.
Because normally if you're up there and people heckle you, it's really bad and it's very distracting. It's very difficult to keep your composure. So we recommend not doing that. But we admired him more because we heckled him and he handled that. But you're right, Justin. Don't listen to me, people. Don't do that. It's mean. Don't be like me.
It was in good spirit, I know. Okay, so this ngAdd, if I am a user and I do ngAdd on a library out there that isn't tricked out ready for this schematic scenario, what's that experience going to be like?
So that's a good question. So if you were to run ngAdd and something that doesn't support it, like ngXS, right? Nothing. I didn't get any reaction.
Throw it down, Austin. That was cold. Sorry.
I wasn't even paying
attention.
Yeah, he wasn't. That's okay. So if you were to run ngAdd on a package that does not support ngAdd, then it would just install that dependency for you and run the npm install for you. So it would be just like running npm install -- save, or install package name -- save.
I feel like you and Philippe and Hans sometimes must have meetings where it's like, okay, what can we possibly think of that these crazy people are going to try, and make sure that we think of that? Because like you think ahead of everything that we could possibly do wrong, and you have an answer for it.
Oh, I think that it was just a product of, all right, well, we've got this tool Schematic sitting here, and we feel like it was being underutilized with ngNew and ngGenerate. That, not that it doesn't fulfill those needs, but it certainly does. But it's possible to do so much more, to be able to say, all right, well, rather than just generating some things, why not generate the idea of adding it for a new package, or to update a package to keep everything up to date. And I want to give a shout out to Stephen Fluin, who came up with this term for ngUpdate. It was basically the idea that Angular and supporting libraries are essentially evergreen now, where versions don't really matter. That it's, I mean, we've kind of been driving home that point that versions are less important. But with update, to be able to just get your application up to date with the latest versions, it's like your application is becoming evergreen with the different versions that support ngUpdate.
You know, while you're on that, let's mention the website that's out there. What's the URL for the website that shows?
Isn't it like update.angular.io? Is that it?
It is. It would be the same one that I gave out earlier.
Okay. So that's going to tell you
what you need to do in order to update your application. And then
I was a little confused by this whenever I first saw it, because I assumed I could just do what Ed said, like ngUpdate all, and it would work. So I was like, what is this website guiding me through steps? Why is there steps?
There needs to be steps at this point to get up to version 6, because the version of ngUpdate that is currently new in version 6, you have to essentially get to that point first before you can start utilizing the features that were added.
Oh, okay. I see.
So that's why this initial process of using ngUpdate is a little bit more complicated and involved than going from 6 to beyond.
But I think it also gives you a home for describing what those changes are, right? I mean, you look at your diff in your Git, and you may not be evident of what changed. Like the template to ng template, that may be pretty clear cut, but other changes might not. And you could go to the site and get that explanation of what the differences are, you know, human readable.
Absolutely. Making things easier is good. What else? I was looking at the specifications. Update.
Libraries.
Okay, beside of ngAdd, what's the next thing? Is it libraries?
No, it's not. But it's really not. So
Fine.
It's the new configuration structure changes.
Oh, now that is cool, though. I'll give you that.
See?
Okay,
I'm not just making things up to upset you and Austin.
Yeah, right.
So if you have your Angular application from version 1.x of the CLI and you update it to version 6, you'll notice that one of the changes in there is the fact that the .angular-cli.json file is removed. And yes, and added in there in its place is angular.json. The name changes for consistency, as well as it's also not a hidden file by default. It doesn't start with a dot, although .angular.json is supported as well if you want to hide that file from your file system. But the structure of that file has changed. From the pieces that I've worked on, the main advantage of that is to be able to predefine values for when you run ngGenerate or ngUp or ngNew. You were limited to the number of values that you could set within there. And you were also limited to only specify defaults for schematics that were the default schematics. So if you wanted to default something for a component or directive, you would have to have in your own custom schematics, have to have one called component or directive. But now with the new structure, you have to specify the full name and path of the schematic. So collection : schematic name. And that will give you the ability to provide defaults for any of your schematics that you're running generate against.
Why does that give us the ability to do defaults?
Because it gives you the granularity to specify the collection as well, not just the schematic name. Okay. And also the structure of the Angular CLI.json was restrictive of what keys you could put in that JSON file. But those have been removed. It just needs to be a string with an object to be able to define different defaults within there. So if you have your own custom schematics, so maybe you're using the NX ones that Narwhal provides, then, okay, I was actually guessing that Justin would be more excited about that, but apparently it was just Bonnie getting excited. But if you want to provide defaults for those schematics, you could do that.
Well, Martin was just asking about that in the chat, about the NX workspace not being needed anymore.
That's a much more involved discussion. But
Sorry, Martin.
Oh, involved.
That question was rejected, Martin.
No. It wasn't rejected. It's just much more involved than the time that we have remaining here.
Victor released a great blog post today, just earlier today, about the release of NX6 and its support for Angular CLI 6 and how they work together with all the new changes and stuff. So check that out.
Victor's blog posts are kind of epic. I love his blog posts.
But yeah, this talk some more about the changes to the project file.
Yeah,
and stuff like
yeah.
that.
So to finish that point, so with schematics, you can provide defaults for whatever collection and whatever schematic you're using. So if you are using your own custom schematic and you have a collection with your own custom schematics within there, you can define different defaults within there. And those will be picked up from the config file and passed along to your schematic before it even executes. So that's something that I think provides a lot more flexibility to you as a consumer of the CLI, as a user.
Is that all that changed in that file? Oh.
The file name changed too, remember? No, it's also restructured to the, so there was an apps property in Angular CLI.json. That's now projects, but you can specify different configuration based at the project level. And that also is reflective that there's new builders. So the build tooling is detached now from the CLI itself. So they're separate packages. And we're working on.
And that's so we can use Bazel, right?
Eventually there will be a Bazel builder as well. Right now it's just the default Webpack builder.
When's that coming?
In the future.
Hey, let's talk a little bit about that app and the build things and stuff like that in a little bit more detail to maybe kind of identify what the experience was like before that, and then what it is that this is providing, so people know how, if they go and hack on that and stuff like that, what they're working with.
Yeah. So a lot of the different commands. So build, test, serve, E2E, lint. I think that may be all of them. The process that runs to execute those is something called a builder, and those each have their own different config, or those different, or have their own options within Angular.json, which can be overridden with different configurations. So, for example, you can specify with your production configuration when you're building to replace the environments file. So that's much more flexible to be able to specify a given replacement. So maybe for dev and staging, you have different, or is it the same environments file or something else that you want to replace within there? You can do that. You can specify, I think it's like AOT and build optimizer can all be defined within the Angular.json. So you can specify those values. So you don't have to worry about writing long config scripts or NPM scripts to be able to supply different options. You can do that right in your configuration file.
So what it did, right, was these maps, but then we had this whole build process that was the same for any one app. And you would target an app and say, this is the one that I want to build, right? And now with this, we have more fine-grained control over that build process per app, or in this case, their project, right? So per project, we have more fine-grained control over the build process, the test process, all those individual steps. Now we can configure per app and have more control. Is that correct?
So you have the ability to configure that from there to be able to define those different options that you want passed into those different processes that get run. And down the road, once we finalize on some more standardized APIs, that process will be opened up for people to build their own builders. So if you necessarily want to have a Bazel build, or if you wanted to write one based off of Gulp or Grunt or Broccoli or anything else, or what have you, then you can run that there, or specify your builder there, and then pass options into it. And that's the process that we run to handle that.
We have more. Sorry, go ahead.
I just have
one on this.
Sorry.
That's
There's
okay.
one more thing on this, right? So I think a good scenario example of this would be, I've got my project or my individual application, right?
Mhm.
And I want to server-side render it, right? And so in development, I don't want to server-side render it. I want to work on it just as is, but then I want to be able to build it for server-side rendering as well. And prior to that, we would have like a main server TS file along with our main file, and it was kind of tricky to do that. But with this build scenario scripts, we could have one that says build, for local, build for server-side rendering, and kind of encapsulate that and organize that a little bit better, and gives us that opportunity to kind of do that cleanly in here. Would that be correct?
Yeah, so server-side rendering is a little bit different in that you're also building for a completely different target there. So instead of building with the target of client in mind, you're building in regards to server as the output. That's why garage door opener running, if you guys hear that sound in the background. But yeah, you can specify the configuration for that to be able to run that, and then different sub configurations within that. So the target would be server, and then the configuration would be production or whatever.
I was just going to say that there were some more really good questions in the YouTube chat, and I pasted them into the Hangout chat. So if you get a chance.
Well, I saw the one about Sarah asking, is that the Angular -dev kit thing? Which that was when we were talking about Builder, which I was sharing real quick because I just generated one earlier that I'm hacking away on, and I believe the answer for her question is yes. That is what we're talking about. If you can see that.
I think that's Sarun. I think that's a guy.
Yes.
So, I'm sorry.
That's okay, but no, but
totally
I like
read that wrong. Okay.
Yeah, so architect is essentially the runner behind the scenes there that processes those requests. Whoa. Who's sharing?
That's Alyssa.
Okay. I got lost. I saw me like 4 different times and I was very confused. So yeah, it's basically the runner, but like I said, that API isn't standardized or finalized or essentially public yet, even though it's all open source. You can go take a look at it. But that's subject to change as changes are made moving forward for that.
You know who hasn't got a chance to ask any questions? Ed.
Hey, Ed.
I got a question.
Yeah,
hey guys.
Ed. Woohoo.
So I haven't written a schematic myself, but I was wondering, is it going to be a thing to be able to generate kind of like a new schematic to get started with?
That's already a thing. So there is the Angular CLI, and then there's also the Schematic CLI.
I didn't know there was a different one.
Yeah, since Bonnie already plugged my talk from ngConf, my solo talk from ngConf, you can go ahead and watch that, and it shows you how to get set up with creating your own schematics, as well as a few walkthroughs with a few examples.
So cool. We got to link that in this. We got to find that on the YouTubes.
I should know this. I was at that talk.
Oh my God. Sometimes
I guess
like
I spent more time.
Yeah, multiple times hearing the same thing before it sinks in, and you're like, yes.
That's not the problem. Actually, was that there were some hecklers up front that were distracting from people learning.
Hey, he was in the front row with us, so
yeah. I think I was one of them.
He was trying to learn.
So
we
covered.
didn't talk about library support yet.
Oh my word! Is that the next thing after config? Oh, Justin has something.
I have one more thing, and it's going to be a hard question.
Okay.
So sorry ahead of time, but not sorry. There's been, a lot of changes here, right? We've got this thing from apps now to projects. We got the change to the Angular CLI JSON file and things like that. There's a lot of training material and written up documentation out there online about the CLI that now has to be updated. What was the thought process in terms of that with these changes? I mean, I'm sure you weighed that in, right? But how difficult was that?
Yeah, Mike, what were you thinking?
I did not put it that way.
The thought process, to have the idea of finer grain control over your build process is something that's been expressed by a lot of people across many, many GitHub issues. By detaching that process and the configuration of those processes into their own separate packages allows for that type of flexibility. So to be able to satisfy that greater need, as well as getting rid of some of the technical debt and some of the hurdles of the configuration. Like I said, you were very restrictive of what you could define in previous versions of the Angular CLI.json that are gone with the Angular.json. So it gives us flexibility to move forward. So the main hiccup wasn't so much the idea of having process, or the process of updating educational material, but the idea that the greater user base would have a seamless transition was what we focused on. So the ability to have ngUpdate to be able to take your Angular CLI.json and transition that to AngularJSON, as well as then installing the necessary dependencies from there, really clears things up and makes that process seamless for end users. Not so much for content creators. I understand that those processes have changed, but I think that the idea of clearing up some of the technical debt, reducing our bundle size, and providing more flexibility was the catalyst for those changes. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I still have a concern about, like, are we going to be in the same spot we were with Angular 2 and whatnot, where people are going to be Googling, how do I launch an app? How do I build a specific app in the CLI and get old documentation and not know, well, why does that not work? Which version am I on? And now content creators out there, they're going to need to put, this was for version prior to version 6 and all that same sort of bad deal, right?
Right.
The source code should be documentation itself.
I think that, how do I want to state this? For the public surface area of the CLI, there's really only been 2 changes that I can think of off the top of my head. You still run ngBuild, you still run ngServe, you still run ngTest. For end users, that really hasn't changed. It's almost like an internal refactor in that side of things. The changes that I can think of are ngEject is temporarily deprecated. It's coming back, but for right now, it's disabled. And then the consolidation of ngget and ngset into ngconfig for simplification, and it kind of fits more with the ecosystem for like git config, and I think npm config works the same way, that it's just a config command where you can get and set via a single command. Those are really the only 2 changes that I can think of that it really changed, like an API wise, from typing CLI commands. Now, a few of the options have changed. Anything previous to version 6, there were aliases that were multi-character. So, for example, skipgit was SG. That all of those have been consolidated down to a single character. So that's a change to the public API. The benefit there is that it's based off of the POSIX standard. So you can then chain those. So you could, so I think inline style and inline template are now S and T for generating new applications as well as components. So you'd be able to, instead of having to do -IT, -IS, you can do -ST to get both. So you can chain those single letter flags.
To get at the heart of it, though, I think it's almost like the eternal question of like moving forward, like being defined by our past versus like how much of that can we actually let us, like, because there are things that, like you're saying, that changed, but I think, to Justin's question was like, like, is it going to be 1 to 2 all over again? I don't think it's going to be that bad, but I'm very much on the side of the fence of like, let's shake things up, but I know that makes it super painful and we're not supposed to break the web. So.
Yeah. And I think that by having ngUpdate now in place, will simplify a lot of those places. Content creators will still have to update their content. However, for end users, I think simplifying that process for them.
Justin, it's job security for you.
I'm not really thinking so much about, well, a little bit about the content creation, but just the fact that like you as an end user want to Google search or Bing or whatever you want to search, right? And find some answers. What are you going to find, right?
So I have to mention one other thing that's kind of bittersweet with version 6 of the CLI. So as many people know, the Angular CLI version 1 and pre-1 all the way before like alpha from inception was built as an add-on to the Ember CLI. And that those dependencies changed and it ended up being internalized and a whole lot of other things. But as of version 6, there are no more dependencies upon the Ember CLI. Definitely grateful for all the functionality that was gotten from the Ember CLI and the community that they have there. They were great with answering questions that we had. But with changes to our build process and changes, including schematics, there was less of a need for that dependency. So that is no longer in place.
Hey, can we take a quick second to do a clap of a thank you for the Ember CLI for all of it?
Yay! Do you just do like a round robin clap, Bonnie?
That's a round of applause, Alyssa.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. All right, you're taken away from library time. So
Library time.
So as Justin clarified, the move from the apps array to a projects map, so it's actually an object, not an array, to define different projects within your Angular.json. There's two different project types they can specify. One is application, the other is library. So you can now develop and compile and work with and deploy libraries using the Angular CLI.
Oh yeah. Well, Ed and I tried to do this yesterday and it did not work.
Wait, I thought you said he could, yeah, Ed said he got
I
it.
stayed up late and everything works perfectly now. I'm very happy.
Can we hear your story? Yeah.
Why didn't it work and how did you fix it?
Well, I need Mike to clarify something first with the docs. So you go look at NX, and they talk a lot about workspaces, and I've heard that NX is based on the Angular CLI. When you generate a new CLI project, would you consider that kind of root folder called a workspace because it kind of contains like a projects folder?
Yes. So the idea of where your package.json and your Angular.json is the root of your workspace.
Okay, so that's the same thing. Okay.
In terms of project structure, the default CLI structure, if you generate multiple projects, things will be put into a projects folder where, correct me if I'm wrong, with NX, you will get an apps and libs folder at the root of your project. Or workspace, is that correct?
Correct. NX still uses the apps and libs directory structure.
Okay.
So CLI 6 project.
Yeah. So as of now, from as Justin just clarified, from the root in an NX workspace, you will have apps and libs where those are kept separate. Whereas with the CLI, you'll have a projects folder with all of those sub-projects, apps and libs living under the project structure. As of right now, that may or may not change in the future. I can only talk about the present and the past, but the past isn't important according to Alyssa, so we'll just talk about the present.
Keep moving forward. No, so my point with using the new libraries, make sure you generate your libraries with 6.0.2, especially if you're using scoped, like
603.
I thought you said 3.
603. At least 6.0.2. I looked in the issue. But yeah, use 603. It'll be even better.
602 lived for about 4 hours. There was a bug with generating that if you generated a new application, the unit test would have failed right off the bat. So don't do 2, use 3.
Yeah, so when I got there, it was 3. But yeah, make sure you do that. It slightly changes like your TS config from what I've gathered. But yeah, it works with 3.
Mike, I'm pasting more library questions into the chat from Avatsev. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Oh, and then just side note, if it's not working, you're trying to import, say you have multiple libraries generated within a single workspace, you'll get, and you're trying to use Angular modules, you can get like injectable not found errors, which are very confusing because they don't really have anything to do with it. But just basically take your source folder out and regenerate your library, and your config should work better.
So yeah, his question is talking about, it's kind of talking about what you are saying. I was upgrading our company today from his libraries from V5 plus ngPackager to Angular 6, and notice that when you generate a new library with Angular 6, there are 2 ngPackage config files inside projects mylib.
Yeah, I read that real quick. So I believe if you were to look in your angular.json file, there should be a file replacement section inside of that configuration for that new project that was added, so that when you build it, in production mode, it will switch to use the production file. That's something that if you wanted to manually remove that, you could to get rid of the production one and get rid of the file replacement configuration. But I'm sure it's there for a good reason. The gentleman who worked on ngPackager, David Hergus, I believe, and I think he's been on the show as well, worked on this, as well as some people on the core CLI team, especially Philippe Silva and Hans Larson and Charles Lighting. So if it's there, it's probably there for a good reason. Likely that those values are just replaced depending upon how you're building your package, your library.
Cool. Sorry about that, Justin. I didn't realize we were running so late on time. I made us squeeze that one in.
Oh, that's all right. No worries. No worries.
I'm trying to think if there's any other features within CLI 6 or things that are different to talk about. I got nothing. Everything else is the same old, same old.
So really quick, just on the libraries thing, then let's just clarify at a base level what it is when we're talking about libraries, right, and building libraries.
Yeah. So a library is essentially an ng module or multiple ng modules that you could pull into your application. So as you write in your applications, there may be different things that you want to share across multiple applications, or things that you would like to have developed separately for bundling purposes or for code organization purposes. So to be able to develop those separately. And
every library has a workspace, and that's at the root, or no?
Libraries would belong to a workspace. So you could have multiple libraries in a given workspace, as well as multiple applications. So if you have 2 different applications, maybe you have an orders public shopping cart application as well as an internal application. Maybe you use the same library to access order information.
And then if you want to generate just a standalone library, I linked an issue, but you can basically generate a new Angular application, then add a library and remove your source and end-to-end folders. And then if you tweak your Angular CLI.json file a little bit, then you just have a standalone Git repo with just a single library.
Oh, this is so cool, Ed.
That is a possibility. However, I would recommend not doing that, only for the sake that if you were to just create a library separately, you have no means to run that and execute and exercise that library within that project or within that workspace. So if you have an application within there as well, then you can consume that library and exercise tests against it in a working environment, because a library by itself is not executable or runnable.
Are you saying to kind of use the default app as like a demo, sort of?
As a demo or a dev environment to be able to test your library.
And unless you NX it, or you use something like Playground for Angular along with your library. There's a couple different ways you could possibly do that.
Playground for Angular is pretty cool. Yeah.
Okay.
I remember when I first saw Playground for Angular and I was so excited, and I was like, hey, Justin, who wrote that? And he's like, maybe you should research your guests a little better, Bonnie.
So the library thing, you're talking about reusable code, right? I mean, are this libraries like redistributable code,
Yes.
or could it actually just be something that we're not using ngPackager for, but just some stuff that we want to use across these different projects?
It is redistributable, I believe. I'm looking right now. Give me a quick.
Although I was at like IO and I was talking, like me and Steven were at this like Angular review my Angular app session. And this one girl came up and she was asking about, she has multiple services that like different work apps use. And she wanted to have like this, like, you know, one version of this service that they all used. And that's when he was like, library, like, and he showed her that. And so that's not necessarily redistributable, right? Because it's just within her company, just with a few apps, but they're putting those services within a library.
You can publish a library to a NPM repo or NPM, I guess repo you would call it, or you could set up a private server for that, or just pay them for a private account. So, and then it's just an NPM install away if you need to use it in any other projects.
Or if you want to use projects within your company with other projects, then you would go for something like a library or a mono repo. Like, and hey, so I know we're running out of time, and it's not our fault. It's actually Chaos Monster's fault for asking all those awesome questions. But did we get to NX? Because we have some new stuff to come out, and I don't want to run out of time and not do that.
That's another show, Bonnie.
Yeah, but we just have NX6 come out like today.
Today, people.
So I'm muting people. So I want to, because we were talking about libraries, I want to finish that story. So as of with version 6, there's a story within the CLI's wiki that has explanation about libraries, about how to create them, as well as how to publish them. So all that's covered there. I'll be sure to include that in the show notes, which may or may not exist, so that people have the link to that as well.
And can we, real quick, like fastest answer ever, what's the difference between a library and like an Angular element? Like if I make an Angular element and I want to share it out, do I need to put that in a library?
I'm not sure if we're at the point now to, I'm not familiar with
fastest answer ever, Mike.
No,
you can't. Not yet.
No, yet.
Beautiful.
Just mute that issue.
I believe the idea with the element is that you're going to have a build artifact, right? So you build your Angular element, you're going to have JavaScript that goes with it, right? And then that would be what you would distribute that somebody could then embed, bring into their existing application and make use of. Right?
Yeah, from my understanding, you're right. It was separate from a library. Like it wasn't supposed to be.
Like you could probably bundle it in a library and distribute it that way, but you could also have a build artifact, like, you know, ng build it out and send it off there. So on the libraries though, when you generate a new library project in the CLI, you're getting all the bits for ng packager and everything automatically. Is that correct, Mike?
Yeah, that's included in the builder for library.
There's like, Alyssa, you brought that point up about, I have a service that I want to use between two different projects, right? Two different apps. And I don't have any intent of that service going out, being a package that somebody can install or anything like that. I just need to be able to use it between these two things. And it's kind of a shared library code, but not something I want to redistribute. And that's something that with NX, with the libs that are in there, they can be that chunk of reusable code that could be within that mono repo workspace that you can share and use and import across those things, but don't necessarily have all the additional stuff of being ready to be a redistributable kind of package, that sort of thing.
What if one of those packages is written in CoffeeScript?
That's another episode too, right?
Okay, I know I was really excited about the libs, but we're over that now. Let's talk about NX, guys.
Say that again. It broke up a little bit.
I said, I know I was all excited about libs and I was pushing you guys to talk about libs, but now it's time to talk about NX before we run out of time.
Yes, I'll do a quick mention about that, and then we should probably have an episode where we can kind of get into it in more detail. But yeah, NX6 released today. It aligns itself with the Angular CLI 6. So it supports, you can do ngNew, schematic, or a collection, at narwhal/schematics to generate a new NX workspace with the CLI 6 and all that stuff. You can add NX to an existing Angular CLI 6 repo with the ngAdd command, that sort of thing. And we basically set up all the restructuring and everything to support the latest bits, all the stuff we talked about with the CLI today, to be in line with supporting that, and then add the additional power and stuff on top of that as well. And we have blog posts about it. So blog.nrwl.io, you can check that out. And that announces how it aligns with the CLI 6 and stuff like that. And then what the additional things on top of it kind of mean for the fact that the CLI has this now concept. I mean, kind of always had the concept of multiple applications, kind of monorepo, but now has more rich support for it, and how NX just built on top of that and leverages that. So check that out.
That was really quick and that was very informative, but I'm wondering, is there any way that we can get an episode about, because I know that we had an episode about NX a while back, but is there more? Can we get another episode kind of on the calendar going forward?
So
can we get Victor Sapkin? Oh,
so we don't have anything on the schedule for next week. I may know some people that I can reach out to and see if they can come on. And maybe we'll do the NX6 episode next week to correspond with this one.
Oh, yeah.
I just want to say, I saw with NX today the build depths tool. That looked really cool to show kind of your dependency structure visually.
Yeah, so we have this dependency graph functionality that you can run in there that will show you for your different libraries, your different apps, what's all dependent on it, that sort of thing visually. You can kind of get an idea for that.
Is that new, or have you had that?
It's new. I think we might have had it in a previous version just recently, but it's pretty new.
It was nice to see because I've had it on the back end with Go code for a while, but it's nice to have that support on the front end too.
Yeah, and then you have this ability to tag your libraries to kind of set rules around what their usage is and what their scope is, that sort of thing. So based on that, plus the dependency graph, we can make some assumptions and identifications about how you've structured your code and what your intentions are for that. And then we can raise issues and scenarios as you develop, as your teams work on things, to say, hey, this library was designed to be used, or this lib is designed to be used as like common UI stuff. You're trying to use it in a different manner. We'll let you know about it, right? Or this is a lazy loaded module lib. You're trying to bring it in without lazy loading it. Probably shouldn't be doing that, based on the specifications that you set. And so much more guidance and identification of the ruling or your business logic around how you want to utilize your code in that monorepo.
Because there's only one right way, and it's Victor's way.
Or your way, or anybody else's way. Whatever you deem is your way, that's the way, right? Until it changes.
I think you should get Victor and Jeff Cross on the show next week, and I'll be good, I swear.
Cool. Yeah,
that would be a good episode because we have a lot of questions.
Cool. All right. Anything else on the CLI 6? Going once, going twice. We good? Everybody should use it, right, Mike?
Absolutely. Use CLI. CLI helps. Yay.
Yes. Awesome. All right. Do we want to do some picks before we close it out?
Do we have time?
Austin has some picks.
I have some picks.
All right. All right. I'm going to go down the list, though. You're not first. Sorry. Alyssa, do you have any picks?
Ah!
I just saw Deadpool 2.
Nope, Alyssa, my turn.
That's terrible. I wanted to hear about Deadpool.
Deadpool 2. It was funny.
I don't want to hear anything about it.
It was good. It was good, but don't bring your kids. And I'm going to see Solo Thursday. Super excited about that. So yeah, that's all.
The new Jurassic Park came out too today.
Wait, it did? What? Today's a Tuesday. That doesn't make any sense.
What did?
The new Jurassic Park.
Movies don't come out on Tuesdays.
Oh, that comes out next month.
No, I'm
right,
pretty
Austin,
sure
what's
it
your
came out
pick?
today.
You got the floor, Austin.
Hashtag fake news.
You guys got me confused now. Angular Material 6.1 came out. Lots of new stuff, just minor things mainly, but lots of bug fixes as well. There is a new tool for people that use Sketch that allows you to actually like use Sketch with Angular.
Yes, I've heard of this tool and I use Sketch. It sounds so cool.
And then there was a really awesome blog post put out on Angular Ivy that like shows like how it works, like very detailed, and it's even got this fun graphic. So recommend checking that out as well.
Which one was that? Was that Sam's? Who wrote that one?
I don't know. I just know the
Sam
pretty
Julian.
graphic.
There was an Angular in-depth one, and I'm pretty sure Sam Julian put out one, which I think was a different one.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the one by Alexei Zouv.
I think that's the one on Angular in-depth. I'm pretty sure, but I'm not
there.
positive.
I linked it, but
Angular
yeah,
in-depth is the bomb.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but there are lots of good articles out there.
Bonnie, got any other picks?
My only pick is the people watching on chat, because we have a lot of good questions on chat today. So Chaos Monster and Saroon and Avatsev, let's have a round of applause for our and also they all said a good job to Mike, because you were awesome in the hot seat today.
It was the 34 seconds of preparation that I was given, and
that was my fault. That was my fault. We had a cancellation today, and I said, you know what people want to hear more about? Mike.
Yeah. I thought it turned out good. We had a good episode.
It was
Ed,
awesome.
Do you have any picks?
My pick is the Angular CLI 602 and 603. They just made libraries possible for me very easily, so I'm happy. And then Bonnie for convincing me to switch over to the CLI with her on our big project.
I told you wouldn't regret it.
No, and it worked, and we did it in it was like a couple days we did that, or it was less than a week.
Because it was an Angular JS project, and he was kind of doing the incremental, and I convinced him to just go for it, and he did, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
So I do have a correction. Jurassic Park does not come out till next month.
It's, I'll further correct it and say it's Jurassic World. But if you're watching this episode on June 22nd or later, it's out.
Oh my goodness.
All right, Mike, you got any picks?
Yeah. So we talked about ngAdd, but one of the things I didn't mention is actually the only implementation of ngAdd that I wrote. Is if you were to run ngAdd at Angular/PWA, will configure your application to be a PWA, give you service worker, a manifest file, icons. It's the Angular icon, which you have to change to be.
That used to be a flag, like dash, and now it's not a flag?
Yeah, that changed. I apologize to your husband 32 seconds after your talk concluded from ngconf that was changing. But ngAdd at Angular/PWA to modify your application to be a PWA.
Nice. Nice.
Justin, Martin says you get the award for the cleanest office.
Or the
Which I think should go to Mike Brocchi, really. I mean, Mike, you were wrong.
I like to thank the absence of stuff in here for my win.
I was going to say, is it clean or is it barren?
Hey, he's got the Star Wars poster.
He has a poster on his wall. And I would bet to say that's the only thing on any of the walls in there.
No. There's movie posters. There's all kinds of stuff on all the other walls. You just them.
Yeah, and you're missing Samantha art.
I'm going to film all future episodes pointed at the ceiling like this. And this way I don't have to worry about keeping the office clean. Obviously I don't anyway, but this way it's
beautiful ceiling. It looks lovely.
All right. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks, Mike, for all your insight on the CLI as usual. Thanks, Ed, for joining us as a panelist today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks guys for having me. It's a lot of fun.
And we'll see what we can do about an NX episode next week. And then we've got a couple other ones lined up after that. We got Alex coming on to talk about some brain Angular stuff. Pretty cool. And then some other stuff. So looking forward to it. As always, thanks for joining us. And we will catch you on the next episode. Later.